J'ouvre maintenant la réunion.
I will call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 133 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics. Pursuant to Standing Order 1083H and the motion adopted by the committee on Tuesday, February 13, 2024, the committee is resuming its study of the impact of disinformation and of misinformation on the work of parliamentarians.
We welcome our witness for the first hour today from Bell Media, Inc. We've got Mr. Richard Gray, Vice President of CTV News. Mr. Gray, welcome. I understand all the tests have been completed on your Zoom, and you have up to 5 minutes to present your opening statement to the committee. Go ahead, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members of the committee. I am pleased to be here to contribute to your study on misinformation and disinformation, which are important issues facing Canadians. As Canada's most watched news source, CTV News is keenly attuned to the challenges of a changing information ecosystem. In a rapidly evolving world, it is more important than ever that Canadians have access to fair and balanced news coverage they can trust. As a reputable news organization in a democracy, it is the fundamental purpose of CTV News to enable Canadians to know what is happening and to clarify events so they may form their own conclusions. This is done through accurate, fair, and relevant stories told in a clear and compelling way. I want to recognize the tireless work of CTV News journalists and staff who go above and beyond every day to uphold our mandate with the highest standards of honesty, transparency, and independence. It is not always easy work, but it is important work, and it deserves to be recognized. For over 60 years, CTV News has kept Canadians informed of the stories that matter to them. In recent years, this has included a once-in-a-generation pandemic, elections at home and abroad, natural disasters, geopolitical crises, economic issues, and much more. Thanks to the hard work of its journalists and staff, CTV News is consistently named Canada's most trusted news source. This is something we are very proud of because trust is something we take very seriously. Our mandate is to uphold journalistic integrity and independence under all circumstances and at all times without exception. We are a member of the Trust Project, a global network of news organizations, and draw on tools they've developed to help Canadians make informed news choices. As a news team, we have a responsibility to hold people and organizations with power and influence accountable to the public, and that responsibility extends to how we manage our own affairs. In this industry, mistakes sometimes happen, despite our best efforts. I am of the belief that how we respond to those mistakes is critical to maintaining public trust. This brings me to an issue that has garnered attention recently. A report on the CTV national news broadcast on September 22nd did not meet our expected and required high editorial standards. As is standard practice in these circumstances, we conducted an investigation to determine whether a breach of our editorial standards and practices had occurred. The investigation found that 2 members of the CTV News team were responsible for altering a video clip. Their actions violated our editorial standards and are unacceptable. As a result, those individuals are no longer members of the CTV News team nor employed by any Bell Media entity. This is a deeply regrettable situation. In my 33-year career working in television news, this is the first time I have come across something like this. I hope that our response speaks to the importance we place on upholding our commitment to fairness, objectivity, and the truth. Our duty is to provide accurate, fair, and balanced coverage of the issues that matter to Canadians, and to do so fully independently. It's of the utmost importance to us. Moving forward, we will continue to work to earn the trust of the millions of Canadians who rely on us each and every day. And given the growing demand for round-the-clock news coverage, CTV News will continue to transform the way we deliver news to Canadians, both on television and online. As someone with decades of experience in the news business, I have seen firsthand the decline in the trust in the media, in no small part to the rise of misinformation and disinformation and their impact on media literacy. This concerns all of us. I hope we can spend our time together today discussing this challenge and potential solutions to combat misinformation and disinformation so we can maintain and build trust in our institutions for the years to come.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gray. Appreciate you being under time. Just one of the things I found myself saying lately is that the dynamics between Zoom and in-person sessions is one that's difficult to manage. Oftentimes, members, with the limited time that they have, will try to reclaim their time. I don't want you to take that personally, Mr. Gray. So we're going to start with our first 6-minute round. I'm going to go to Mr. Barrett. Mr. Barrett, 6 minutes. Go ahead.
Sir, how much money does Bell Media or CTV News receive in annual subsidies from Justin Trudeau's Liberal government?
Unlike the CBC, CTV nor CTV News receive any subsidies from the government. In fact, we're required to spend at least 30% of our annual revenue each year, which amounts to $1.2 billion since 2011 on Canadian programming expenditures. At the same time as all of this, we are losing $185 million a year on our television operations, including a loss of $40 million on news alone.
So CTV hasn't received any regulatory relief or no wage relief in the last 9 years. Is that your contention?
We receive no subsidies from the government.
The question was regulatory relief or subsidies for wages in the last 9 years?
So there was a decision made by the federal government recently that amounted to having a $40 million impact on Bell Media, but it was not a subsidy. It was, in fact, the elimination of a tax on our revenues that had existed since 1997.
$40 million in regulatory relief. I will skip ahead of you, and $122 million in subsidies for wages. So I want to talk about, pardon me?
The $40 million was not a subsidy.
Sir, you're correcting something that I didn't say. So let's just get off on the right foot here. I referred to it as regulatory relief. $40 million in regulatory relief. Did you receive $40 million in regulatory relief?
We received $40 million in relief through the elimination of a tax.
Okay. So I have a sense of how this is going to go. So let's go. We've seen a lot of examples of CTV activism masquerading as journalism. And I want to give you a couple examples of that. On May 29th of this year, you published a story that was titled, "Poilievre Panned for Video Saying Canadians Fleeing for Nicaragua." Now, of course, this story was about the leader of the opposition talking to Canadians who are suffering after 9 years of a government whose economic vandalism has made it all but impossible for millions of Canadians to survive here. But on April the 2nd, just days later, when RBC releases a report on housing trends and affordability, toughest time ever to afford a home as soaring interest costs keep raising the bar, again detailing the results of 9 years of life under the NDP Liberals, we don't see that. We don't see a story. I don't have a story to offer you from CTV on that, which speaks to the experience that Mr. Poilievre had related about those Canadians. And then, of course, we have the most recent example of the blatant disinformation spread by your network. This disinformation that was perpetrated on Canadians was spread on across your platforms, where instead of the message that Mr. Poilievre had given, which is what we hear from millions of Canadians, and that's the need for a carbon tax election when Canadians can't afford to eat, heat, or house themselves, you altered it to you altered that quote from Mr. Poilievre into one that reflected talking points from Justin Trudeau's Prime Minister's office. So we wouldn't know about that most recent case if you weren't called out by a Conservative staffer. And you said you're sorry, but we know that you're sorry that you're only sorry that you got caught. Isn't that right?
I disagree with your characterization.
So are you sorry?
We have apologized twice for a mistake that occurred. We have
back and reviewed all of your coverage of Mr. Poilievre and his discussions about the Trudeau Liberals' carbon tax on everything that they plan to, of course, quadruple, raising the price of gas to 60 cents a litre. That's seen 1 in 4 Canadians not know where their next meal is coming from. Food bank use skyrocket to records never seen before in this country. Have you gone back and reviewed all of your coverage of Mr. Poilievre, or will it be incumbent on Conservatives to have to go through and review historically the disinformation that CTV has perpetrated on Canadians, or is that something that CTV is going to proactively do? Because I can assure you, sir, that going forward, we know that we now need to do this not just for ourselves, but for Canadians, because certainly the trust has been broken.
I want to give Mr. Grayson a chance to answer that, Mr. Baird. Go ahead.
So thank you. I disagree with the
left.
characterization that we are engaged in a campaign of disinformation with respect to Canadians. It's our job to present all sides of public policy issues in a balanced, accurate, and fair way so Canadians can make informed decisions on them. That's what we do consistently on a daily basis. This particular issue that happened on September the 22nd,
Sir,
was a very rare and unique occurrence.
Well, I'd be interested to know I would be interested to know how you verified that it was rare if you didn't go back and review all of the other instances of coverage. Like I said, I'd like you to tell us now, though, do you think it's appropriate for other media organizations that have criticized that Conservatives called out this disinformation when you yourself admitted that you were wrong? The question is, do you think it is appropriate for other media outlets to have criticized this disinformation having been called out?
Quick response, please, Mr. Gray.
It's not for me to suggest how other media outlets operate. My job is to manage CTV News.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Thank you, Mr. Gray. I am going to go to Ms. Shanahan now for 6 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I thank the witness for appearing before us today. Mr. Gray, I'd like to ask you what steps do CTV News journalists and newsroom managers typically take to ensure that aired reports meet the current journalistic and ethical standards? And I'm looking for a rather fulsome response because we want to understand. I don't know if anyone here has worked in a newsroom. I certainly have not. We want to understand what the process is kind of from the beginning, to the aired product.
So I think the first and most important component part of my answer to your question is that we have very rigorous and steadfast policies that spell out the expectations as to how our journalism is conducted. In addition to these policies, we adhere to the RTDNA Canada and Canadian Association of Broadcasters' respective codes of ethics. What occurs in the newsroom on a daily basis is that all of our team members are expected to follow those policies to the absolute letter. And with respect to particular news stories, they are all vetted by a senior member of the team prior to their going to air to ensure that they are factually correct and that there are no legal issues with respect to the content. What specifically happened in this case on September the 22nd was that those policies and codes of ethics were violated by two individuals at CTV National News. In one case, a reporter altered a script after it had been approved by the producer, significantly changing the meaning and the intent of a particular clip to better suit the requirements of the story they were attempting to tell. In the second case, an editor spliced fragments of two segments of a statement together, creating a clip that hadn't actually been spoken in order to cover a technical issue with the original recording. In my 33 years working in television news, I cannot recall anything similar to this ever happening before.
So how does it happen? How do the newsroom managers, I take it that would be the senior person that would be responsible for making sure that this didn't happen. So there's questions there as to where were they. How do they ensure that they are broadcasting accurately and that it reflects the facts without any tampering? Like, do you have some kind of technical way of checking that. And of course, we're living in an era today where, deep fakes and video alteration and so on is almost child's play.
So we have a elaborate process of verifying all facts. It's multi-layered. But even with that check and balance, it would have been impossible in this case to catch this error, because as I said a few moments ago, what happened here is that the script that was produced and approved by the producer was later altered, and altered in two ways, by the reporter and by the editor. Again, this is something I have never seen and have no experience dealing with in my 33 years in television news.
A long time now, Mr. Gray, the Conservative Party leader has been attacking mainstream media and journalists with the intention to mislead and to make Canadians believe that news networks that they have trusted before are no longer trustworthy. Can you comment on the dangers that this presents to the state of Canada's information ecosystem and our democracy?
It's critically important that there be absolute trust in all of our institutions, both the media and our government. And there has been a general erosion in that trust over the last number of years. I think
that is due to public statements by political leaders such as Pierre Poilievre.
Oh, I wouldn't necessarily say that. I think it is the result of a number of things, probably the biggest one being that there has been a shift in our society where there is a more prevailing attitude that if you're not with us, you're against us.
Oh, that's very interesting. How then are these risks then exasperated when a situation such as the one with CTV News, as discussed earlier, happens? In other words, if you're not with us, you're against us kind of attitude.
So I think that the key point to be made here, and I have tried to do this in my response to questions up to this point, is to say this. We made a mistake. It was a mistake that was impossible to foresee. We apologized immediately. We took follow-up steps to ensure that our standards were being met. It was determined that they weren't. We, as a result of that, made the decision that the two employees involved would no longer be part of CTV News or Bell Media,
okay.
And then we apologized again.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gray. Ms. Shannon. Mr. Gray, en avant de commencer avec...
Mr. Gray, before going to questions from Mr. Villemure, I think he is going to ask his questions in French.
Interpretation is working. Okay?
It is.
Okay. Monsieur Villemure, pour 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît. Commencez.
Mr. Villemure, you have 6 minutes. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gray, for being with us today. We are conducting a study on the impact of disinformation on parliamentarians. So for us, it's a risk to our democracy. And you touched upon a point, the point being confidence in politicians diminishing, and confidence in media is also diminishing. So can you elaborate a bit more on the source of why this is happening?
It's very difficult to say. I think if I was to suggest probably the biggest cause, it is social media and the proliferation of social media and the manner by which it is consumed. Information that is shared on social media does not have the same rigorous journalistic and ethical standards applied to it as we apply, as other media institutions like the Toronto Star, the Globe and Mail, the National Post, Global News, CBC apply to their operations. And as a result of that, it becomes much more difficult for people to know what they can trust, who they can trust, what they should trust.
Qu'est-ce que la désinformation?
What is disinformation for CTV? What's your definition of it?
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand your question.
Vos yeux.
How do you define disinformation?
Disinformation, from my perspective, is anything that is inaccurate.
Est-ce que CTV a été la...
Has CTV been the target of disinformation, for instance, from a foreign influence?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
CTV est prêt?
Is CTV concerned about the risk of disinformation or foreign interference?
I am always concerned about the accuracy and the veracity of the journalism that we do based on the source material that's provided to us. It's why we use multiple stories, all independently verified by CTV.
Si je résume votre pensée,
So disinformation is caused mainly by social media, and you're the victims of it. Should I understand it that way?
I would say that is the prevailing factor, at least from my perspective, in this country.
un peu plus tôt, vous avez mentionné
Earlier, you referred to the existence of an ethics code for journalists. Now, it's my area of expertise. The ethics code usually protects the people who drafted it rather than other groups. So beyond having signed a code of ethics, how does CTV make sure that you're not broadcasting disinformation or misinformation? Can you please remind us the different stages that come into play?
So, again, what happens is that as stories are assigned at the beginning of the day, as work proceeds on them throughout the day, the individual reporters who are involved in the pursuit of those stories are checking in constantly with members of our management team and reviewing what they're gathering and the focus of their stories. Once they complete a final, what I'm going to call a near final draft of their story, the script is submitted to a producer for review. That review ensures that the story is factually correct and there are no legal issues with it. And from that point, the reporter then works with an editor to complete that story for presentation on the television news.
D'accord. Un peu plus tôt, vous nous avez expliqué comment est survenu.
Okay, you were also talking about how the mistake that happened took place, and I'd like to understand why this mistake happened. Was there a willingness to disinform? Was there malicious intent? And you mentioned that you let go these two employees despite them being unionized, so you reacted quickly, but we're not really seeing into what exactly happened.
There was no malicious intent from my perspective. This was two people who were acting independently to make a particular story work on a given day.
Donc, il y avait une volonté de désinformation.
So there was a willingness to disinform.
There was no intent to disinform.
Le résultat était le même.
But the outcome is the same.
Well, there was no intent, but yes, the outcome was the same, and that is why we took the measures and steps that we did, and that these two individuals are no longer part of the CTV News team or Bell Media.
Donc, vous avez agi sur la conséquence et pas sur l'intention.
So you reacted to the consequences, but not to the intention. Is that it?
Well, as I said, there was no intent.
Merci beaucoup.
Okay, merci, Monsieur Villemure.
Thank you, Mr. Villemure.
We're going to go to Mr. Green now for 6 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome to the committee, Mr. Gray. I take earnestly your opening statement. When situations like this occur, the question is, like, what did you know? When did you know? What did you do about it? Sounds like you took pretty swift action. I do want to pick up on my colleague and my friend, Mr. Villemure's questions around the process. In a statement posted on social media on September 26th, it mentions that CTV's news editorial standards were not followed in this case. Which CTV news editorial standards were not followed in this case, resulting in these two employees being dismissed?
There were a number of specific policy violations. There were 3 policy violations under the CTV news policy: our policy on misrepresentation, our policy on the utilization of source material, and our policy on the use of sound, specifically interview clips. There were 2 instances in the RTDNA Code of Ethics that were violated: Article 1 as it relates to accuracy, and Article 3 as it relates to authenticity. And then with respect to the Canadian Association of Broadcasters Codes of Ethics, Clause 5, news, and Clause 6, full, fair, and proper presentation were violated.
It sounds like there was a breakdown in a bunch of different ways. Are these standards similar to others that are in other news channels that you might know of? Is this an industry standard that you're referring to?
Yes, the RTDNA Canada and Canadian Association of Broadcasters Codes of Ethics are an industry standard. And I would imagine, though I don't know for certain, each media organization in this country has its own policy.
So what steps do CTV news journalists and newsroom managers typically take to ensure that aired reports meet the current journalistic and ethical standards?
It's through that vetting process that I described earlier.
And typically, how many people would be involved in that process?
That vetting process it depends on the nature of the story. Minimally, it would be one senior manager who reviews a particular story. It could be as many as 2 or 3, depending upon the nature of the story. We also might actually also have a lawyer review the story, depending upon the particulars of it.
I just want to get a sense for the culture, the workplace culture there. Back in February, Bell Canada laid off 6% of its workforce. This immediately impacted CTV News. You're on the record in a story reported to say that multi-skilled journalists would replace news correspondents and technician teams reporting to CTV National News. So would these 2 people be considered multi-skilled journalists?
No, actually, these 2 individuals would have been constructing a story in what I'm going to call our more traditional format. It is the style that we continue to apply for our teams in Toronto and Ottawa, largely because of the nature of the jobs that they do. They cover stories in more depth, in more detail. They are often involved in media scrums where there are multiple interviewers. And there is the more likelihood that the stories that are covered in Toronto and Ottawa could potentially involve hundreds of people live on location.
So I want to get to the heart of the matter. I know that you are in a very fast-paced environment. Certainly the journalists would be in a fast-paced environment. What was it the case through your obviously your dismissal process? And I want to mention to you that being at committee covers you from you have privilege to speak without it being held against you in civil proceedings. So perhaps you could talk about this. Is it the case that these people were just racing, cutting corners perhaps to meet a deadline? Were they under pressure? I'm still concerned with the points that my friend from the block brought up about the motive, because I'll tell you, sir, on the face value of it, even though this impacted the Conservative Party, of which I have no ideological alignment with, it is still very concerning as it undermines faith, not just in media, but in our democracy. So can you help us understand in your exit interviews, what was the motive specifically?
The motives were different in each case. So in the first case, the clip was altered to take out the reference to the carbon tax, with the explanation given that the story was being reduced in length for time. There was no specific ask of that reporter to alter their story for time. And it was explained to us that that reporter believed that it was understood that the clip's nature was about the carbon tax election.
With 15 seconds left, can you summarize the other side of it?
Yes. There was a technical error in our original record that prevented the video from being presented as was. The editor took the step to manipulate the audio so that the video could cover it.
How long had these two been working? Were they experienced? Was like, because there is a
highly experienced. They were both highly experienced.
And so I would put to you that I would echo the concern of my Conservative counterpart that if this was something they felt comfortable doing in this instant, what is to say that they hadn't done it in other instances?
As I said, as I've said a couple of times, this is the first time I have ever seen anything like this occur in a newsroom in my 33 years experience working with television news.
Okay.
How would they know to have done? Oh,
Thank
you.
You know we're over, Mr. Green.
I appreciate it. Thank you. I was just pressing my luck.
That concludes our first round. I did allow extra time in that first round, given the fact that we do have one witness here. I'm going to try to keep it a little bit tighter in the second round. I want to welcome Mr. Scheer to committee. Mr. Scheer, you have 5 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Oh, God.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just have to go back to what you said. You said that the clip was altered. You showed Canadians something that never happened. And you're telling me now that there was no intent to misinform Canadians and that the reason for that altering of a clip was because it had to be cut down for time. So the words that were cut out were carbon tax election. Okay, now I just timed myself. That took about 1.2 seconds. So you're telling me that there was no intent to misinform Canadians and they had to cut this down for length, and that it would be understood that the quote from the Conservative leader was about a carbon tax election, even though you removed the words carbon tax election. Can you understand how we're having a very difficult time accepting that?
So I want to be clear. What I indicated was that was the explanation offered by the individual involved. That was not my explanation as to what transpired.
Do you accept that? Or do you believe it was deliberately done to mislead Canadians?
I do not believe that it was deliberately done, but
okay,
still, there was a violation of our editorial standards. So these two individuals are no longer part of it.
Do you accept the explanation that was given to you?
We have made a decision that due to the violation of our editorial standards, that these individuals are no longer part of CTV News.
So what do you believe the motive was?
It is not for me to determine what the motive was.
Okay. All right. CTV News is a division of Bell Canada, is that correct?
It is.
Bell Canada makes about $2.3 billion in profit based on 2023 numbers. Is that about correct? Would you agree with that?
I'm not aware of how our company performs overall.
I can confirm that that's true. I'm looking at it on your website. CTV News, does the CTV News division turn a profit for Bell Canada?
No, it does not. We lose $40 million a year in news.
Okay. Bell Canada makes a lot of money because it operates in a protected marketplace. Is that correct?
Again, my responsibilities are for managing the operations of CTV News. I'm not an executive at Bell Canada.
Okay, well, I can tell you that it does. It makes an awful lot of money off the backs of consumers because of government policies. In fact, I have here that Bell Canada in the last year lobbied this government over 50 times. That's more than 4 meetings with government officials a month. That's more FaceTime with senior government levels than some Liberal MPs get. And I would just like to point out that Bell would fear a government that was led by a party that believed in consumer-first types of policies and free market and pro-competition policies, and would benefit greatly from a party in power that continued the status quo, or even worse, providing, taking away more avenues for consumer choice, which would allow Bell to continue to make that kind of profit margin. Is CTV News's viewership increasing or decreasing year over year? Would the viewership this year be higher or lower than last year?
There has been a consistent erosion in viewership in broadcast media in this country for a number of years. It's falling year over year.
I wonder why, when you get caught putting things on the air that you then have to admit never actually happened. I can understand why viewership as well as trust would erode. I can
give you a couple of specifics.
Sorry, I only have about a minute left, so I just want to understand one thing. Does CTV News have a diversity target?
Our goal is to reflect Canada, and the current visible minority percentage in this country, according to the 2021 census, is 26%.
Do you have a target for diversity of political viewpoints at CTV News?
It's our job, as I said earlier, to present all sides of public policy issues in a balanced, accurate, and fair way.
That doesn't answer the question. Do you have a specific policy to ensure that the editorial direction, the journalists, and the producers at CTV News reflect the Canadians' political spectrum?
It's not the job of journalists to reflect the Canadian political spectrum. It's our job to present stories in an unbiased, balanced, accurate, and fair way.
No, but you're telling me you have no way of determining whether or not the producers, the editors, and the journalists all have the same liberal bias. You have no way to determine that.
Quick response, Mr. Gray, please.
Our team do not have a liberal bias.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Scheer. We're going to go to Mr. Fisher on Zoom. Mr. Fisher, you have 5 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Gray, for being here. I have to say that the questions posed by my colleagues from all parties have been excellent, and I'm sure you've completely expected them. There'll be a little bit of repetition just for some clarity. I want to just reiterate a few of the things that you said in your opening statement. You claim to be the most trusted news source. You said responsibility. You have a responsibility to manage your own affairs. That strikes me as something it's difficult to jive with when we're talking about the elephant in the room today. We're talking about the broadcast. We're talking about inaccuracies regarding a leader of a Canadian political party. Can you, and again, I think you may have touched on some of these, but can you go over with some clarity the steps that you've taken to ensure that you can still say that you at Bell Media, at CTV News, have journalistic integrity and the ethics that you must have under that Bell Media umbrella?
So I'm gonna answer your question in 2 parts. First, I'm going to talk about this particular incident. We had the matter brought to our attention. We immediately apologized. I took the further steps because of the nature of what had transpired to initiate a fulsome investigation into what I was concerned was a very serious breach of our ethics and our policies. And we made the decision as a result of that to do two things. We made the decision to terminate the two individuals who were involved in that policy breach. And we took the step to apologize one more time. I think that is entirely appropriate given what transpired. And I think that is indicative of the manner by which we take seriously the trust that Canadians have in us. The second component part to my answer is this. Canadians in this country overwhelmingly choose CTV as their number one source for news with respect to broadcasts at the local level and at the national level every day of the week. And we are also the number one source for digital news in this country. That is not us pandering to an audience. That is people tuning into us because for 60 years we have presented a product that they know, they like, and they trust.
I want to thank you, and you seem like a very earnest person, and I want to thank you for the tone that you've struck here. You said you've never seen anything like this before, yet you also said it's impossible. It was impossible to catch this error. Have there been other errors like this that it was impossible to catch them and they've gotten through? Can you give me other examples of something like this that might have happened that slipped through that you didn't get caught?
Errors happen in news. It's the very nature of what it is we do. We try our absolute best to prevent them from going to air or being published. We are never happy. We are absolutely angry at ourselves when there is a failure in our checks and balances. But, they happen, in large measure because of the deadline pressure that exists and by virtue of the volume that we produce. CTV produces approximately 25,000 hours of local news a year. We produce approximately 20,000 hours of specialty news a year, and we produce almost 500 hours of national news broadcasts a year. So, there is a massive volume there. There is, we go to air with stories that have been vetted and screened, and we do our absolute best to present material in a factual, accurate, balanced way at all times. But sometimes, like everyone, mistakes occur.
Okay.
Are those employees, they're gone from CTV? Are they gone from Bell completely?
These two individuals are no longer members of either CTV News or BCE.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Thank you, Mr. Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Monsieur Villemure pour 2 minutes.
Mr. Villemure for 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before asking my first question, I'll just make a comment on the diversity of political points of view, because words convey a meaning, and I was surprised and offended when I saw Bloc Québécois being qualified as a separatist, because it was used by Jean Chrétien at the time, and today it contains a certain form of negativity, the use of the word itself, but our political position also vis-a-vis English-speaking Canada. So when we talk about diversity of point of view, I'm a little skeptical. So would you have a comment on that?
We, as I've said repeatedly, endeavor to cover public policy issues in a balanced way, so Canadians can make informed decisions on them. We strive, we endeavor to include all points of view.
Moi, monsieur, je veux juste vous dire un truc.
I want to tell you something. I mean, you cover different points of view. I don't have a problem with that. But every time the word separatist is used, it's a judgment call. So finding a synonym, finding another term is what I'm talking about. But I'd like to come back to the problem that's before us today. And I listened to your explanations, and you are referring to a loss of credibility and confidence going down in media outlets. But, and I'm trying to keep an open mind, but I'm having a hard time having more confidence after your testimony compared to before. So what can you tell us to reassure us and propose some solutions so that the public at large is comfortable and has confidence in CTV?
I fully anticipate that as a result of what transpired in this particular case, although it was an isolated incident, from my perspective, we are going to have to work to rebuild a degree of trust with Canadians and with our audience.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Monsieur Villemere. Mr. Green, for 2.5 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Gray, with the experience that you have and with the resources that you have within your reach, what learnings would you provide other news stations in the mainstream environment here in Canada? We have an election coming up. Obviously, this is going to be something closely watched. What have you learned from this situation, and what would be your advice to the other competitors that are in the market in terms of making sure this doesn't happen again?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's absolutely critical that we all are reminding our team members of our policies and our expected editorial standards. I think that is probably the biggest and most important learning for us. Can't just take it for granted, because that is something that probably has been the prevailing approach and attitude in newsrooms for a number of years. So that would be number one. Number two, I think it is the constant reinforcement of what I've said repeatedly, that our job is to present all sides of public policy issues. It is to function in a balanced way. Accuracy and fairness are of critical importance. That's our job. That's our role.
Mr. Gray, I do have to reclaim my time. I have about a minute left. You've stated the ways in which CTV is dealing with this. I talk about there's like an ecosystem within the news media sector. So in the event that you were to rebroadcast reports or take information from other news channels, are there any tools or methods that CTV News can use to ensure that these reports do not contain misinformation or disinformation?
So with respect to Canadian stories in broadcast, we run 100% of our own material. We do not source Canadian story content for broadcast from any other source in this country. With respect to international news material, we only align ourselves with organizations that have similar editorial standards to ours.
That's helpful. Thank you very much for your appearance here today.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Green. I understand Mr. Cooper and Mr. Caputo are going to split their time at 2.5 minutes each. We're going to start with Mr. Cooper. Go ahead, and then we're going to follow that with Mr. Housefather, okay?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Gray, you have repeatedly stated here today that you believe that there was no intent to mislead. Let's look at what happened. CTV spliced together 3 short sound bites. Sound bites spliced together, not even in the order that they were stated, to create an entirely made-up sentence, literally fake news, that entirely changed the meaning of what Pierre Poilievre said. So, on what basis do you conclude that there was no intent to mislead? On what basis exactly?
2 now former staff members of CTV News acted in in a way that was in breach of our editorial standards.
You made a conclusive statement that there was no intent to mislead. So I'm asking you, on what basis do you draw that conclusion?
Based on 33 years of experience, and this being the first and only
Mr.
time
Gray, no one
anything like
believes
this has
you.
ever
And
happened.
you said, for example, that the employee who altered the video, one of the two employees, said that he or she believed that it would be understood to be about the carbon tax election. Yet nowhere in the report is there any mention of the carbon tax election. So on what basis could anyone reasonably believe that that statement was made in that context when there was no context? Quite the opposite, disinformation.
I disagree.
It's a fact that there was no mention of a carbon tax election. You have no credibility, and in the face of the fact that CTV peddled a fraudulent news story, and you haven't apologized, you haven't explained the basis upon which you have asserted that there was no intent to mislead, to simply say you disagree isn't good enough. No one believes you.
We have, in fact, apologized twice.
You haven't apologized at all. You said there was no intent to mislead. No intent to mislead, but you can't even articulate the basis of why.
There was no intent to mislead. We have apologized
Say that,
twice.
but I asked you to provide a basis, and you haven't been able to provide a
2:30.
basis.
2:30. Go ahead, Mr. Caputo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Gray, I take issue with something that you said, and it's actually been said a number of times at this committee. You characterized this as a mistake. Do you stand by that?
It was the violation
Sir,
of
I asked
our
you,
editorial
was this
standards.
a mistake? You've said that before. You stand by the fact it was a mistake. Is that correct?
I stand by the fact that
Sir,
this story went to air in a way that it shouldn't
Sir,
have.
no, you have called it a mistake. And with all due respect, a mistake is when I put milk in my coffee instead of cream. This was a massive error in judgment. This was a previously unforeseen breach of trust from what was once a trusted media organization. And you have said, picking up on what Mr. Cooper said, the explanation given was not to mislead Canadians. Sir, do you even believe that?
I stand by my testimony today wholeheartedly and unreservedly.
You stand by your testimony that the intent was not to mislead Canadians. Did you talk to these people and get their motives, sir?
There was a fulsome investigation.
But I asked whether,
what transpired.
sir, with all due respect, I didn't ask whether there was an investigation. I asked whether you spoke with them. Yes or no?
I did not speak with them beyond having an initial conversation with the reporter the night that this was brought to our attention.
So you had a brief initial conversation, and based on that, you come to committee and say that there was no malevolent intent to mislead based on that. And I ask whether you believe that, and you stand by it. With all due respect, sir, that is an untenable claim that you have arrived at. We are getting ready here for a carbon tax election. At the end of the day, is there one thing that you have done, that you have implemented to ensure that this won't happen again? Just one thing.
Yes, we've terminated 2 individuals.
No, sir, you have countless other employees. I mean, that was possibly the worst answer you could have given. What about moving forward? That is retrospective. What about moving forward? Because, sir, this is what I can say. Why is it that it always is the Conservatives that are fighting this battle? Why is it? Why is it that when it comes to Justin Trudeau and the Liberals, they are not misquoted, but when it comes to Conservatives and Pierre Poilievre, this type of thing can happen, and that is shameful.
I'm going to have to end it there.
I disagree with the characterization.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Housefather for 5 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Gray, when you hire employees, do you ask them what political party they support?
No, we do not.
Would it be impermissible for you to do so? I would think under law it would be if you...
Yeah, I would expect that would be not permissible.
Okay. So In this case, so I understand, the general principle that CTV News is not trying to be biased in one direction or another. But let me come back to this incident because I think there are some unresolved questions that I have. In this incident, did you interview personally the two journalists or the two people in the newsroom that were fired?
No, I did not.
Okay, so that actually surprises me. You did not have you taken the time since the incident to talk to the two of them directly?
I initiated a due process investigation into this matter that was conducted by professionals, and I was apprised at all steps as to what discussions were occurring. And I came to the conclusion following that investigation that it was necessary for these individuals to no longer be members of the CTV News team.
Which I agree with, because it sounds like a step which needed severe disciplinary action. But my question is, today you've testified as to their motive, and you stated you don't believe that they did something for wrong reasons. I won't use Mr. Caputa's word of mistake, although I think you did use that. How would you know that if you haven't directly taken the time to speak to them to understand?
So based on the explanations offered,
that's all secondhand. That's all hearsay. You've come here to testify on behalf of CTV, and you didn't actually take the time yourself in what you describe yourself as an incredibly serious incident, one that was very embarrassing to the network. Why wouldn't you have not personally taken the time to meet with these two people to understand? Have you reviewed previous footage of this reporter and of this producer to check to see whether they did this in any other occasion? Have you gone back to previous footage?
No. There have
but
never
why?
been any
Why would you have
there,
not gone back?
Never.
Like if I know somebody's done something wrong and I know it's incredibly serious, wouldn't I want to go back and see if they've done it before? You only had to randomly look at, let's say take 10 of 100 of the different stories covered by this reporter to look at that. Why would CTV have not done that?
I didn't feel it was necessary.
Didn't feel it's... I can say it's not only the Conservatives, from my perspective, that have concerns, because I'm not a Conservative and I have concerns about the way it sounds like this matter was treated in terms of, I don't think it was taken seriously enough. Again, have you changed any policies? Have you changed any company policies as a result of this incident on a forward-looking basis?
We took appropriate action in this case through 2 apologies.
I'm not questioning your apologies. I'm not questioning your apology. I believe you apologized. I believe you fired 2 people. I just want to understand, as a result of what happened, 2 people were allowed to do something that violated policy. What has been done to prevent 2 people in the future from doing exactly the same thing?
So
what has changed in your policy?
I want to correct something that you just said.
Okay.
2 people were not allowed to violate policy. 2 people violated policy. And there were consequences for that violation of policy.
I'm not trying to suggest CTV gave permission to the 2 of them to violate policy. The 2 of them did violate a policy. What has been done to prevent 2 people from doing exactly the same thing tomorrow?
As I've said repeatedly, this is the first time I have ever experienced anything like this in 33 years.
I know, but you haven't gone back to look at the footage of what these people have done before. You didn't go back to previous stories to check to see whether they did it, and just nobody was ever aware of it because no Conservative staffer ever caught it. Why would you not? Will you undertake to the committee to go back and look at 10 previous stories done by these 2 people to see whether there was anything in there that you may not, or CTV is not aware of?
I don't think it's necessary because there have never been previous complaints about the conduct of these individuals.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Housefather. Unfortunately, that concludes our time with Mr. Gray. Mr. Gray, I want to thank you for appearing before the committee today and making yourself available. I am going to suspend as we get set for the next panel, so the meeting is suspended. Appreciate your patience. We're now entering our second hour. I'd like to welcome our witnesses for today. As an individual on Zoom, we've got Mr. John McAndrews, Managing Director, Digital Society Laboratory of McMaster University, and from the National Security Center of Excellence, Neil Kushwaha, who is the chairperson. I'm going to start with you, Mr. McAndrews. You have up to 5 minutes to address the committee with an opening statement. Go ahead, sir. Thank you.
Thank you and good afternoon. My name is John McAndrews, and I'm the Managing Director of the Digital Society Lab. We are an interdisciplinary research center based at Hamilton's McMaster University. For transparency, the Digital Society Lab has received funding from the Canada Foundation for Innovation, the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, MyTax, McMaster University, and Facebook's parent company, Meta. These funders do not decide how the lab does its research and what it publishes. Our list of funders can be found on our website, digitalsocietylab.org. The lab is also a proud member of the Canadian Digital Media Research Network and receives in-kind support from the CDMRN in the form of space in its surveys. It is an honor to appear before your committee today. Let me begin by speaking plainly about why, in my view, misinformation, particularly misinformation circulated on social media, is so hard to deal with. First, misinformation is hard to detect, and its effects are hard to measure. Not impossible, but hard. Second, the underlying technologies in this space are changing rapidly, and it is challenging for both research and policy to keep up. Lastly, there are sometimes difficult trade-offs regarding free expression in deciding if or how to respond to misinformation. It is the job of Parliament to make some of these calls, in my view, and I do not envy you in your task. Next, let me say a few words about how the Digital Society Lab is trying to help. The lab has 2 in-progress research projects about misinformation. In the first, we begin with the premise that while new technologies risk making the ancient problem of misinformation worse, some of those same technologies also have the potential to help humans combat misinformation. The lab is thus actively developing applications of generative AI to help distill fact-checkable claims from among the vast amounts of posts on social media, and to then leverage information about how these claims are created and shared to provide timely insights. We envision this as a kind of early warning system to surface potentially misleading claims for further human review. In the second lab project, we begin by observing that amidst the growing international body of research about misinformation, we still do not know enough about what features of misinformation the public considers to be harmful and what types of responses citizens consider appropriate. To that end, the lab has recently embarked on a new pilot survey-based research to answer these questions through our partners at CDMRN. The work of both of these projects is preliminary and not yet peer-reviewed, but I believe it holds promise for better understanding misinformation and public support for policy responses to it. In the time remaining, let me turn to offering for your consideration 3 recommendations for how this committee can help fight misinformation and build a more resilient information ecosystem. First, this committee should recommend robust, sustainable public support for research about information and its effects in Canada. This should come in the form of public funding for high-quality, transparent, and publicly accessible scientific research, and in the form of rules that require platforms to share their data with researchers under appropriate conditions and protections. Second, echoing the views of prior witnesses, this committee should also recommend robust, sustainable public support for initiatives that promote up-to-date, evidence-based media and science literacy efforts. There is no single response to misinformation, but an important feature of such literacy efforts, in my view, is that they largely sidestep the most difficult trade-offs regarding free expression that I noted earlier. Lastly, this committee should maintain its own ongoing visibility into the subject matter. To my mind, this means regular quarterly or annual hearings about the state of misinformation in Canada after the committee concludes its present study. Let me end by commending committee members for undertaking this crucial and timely work. I look forward to the discussions that follow. Thank you.
Andrews, under time, the committee always appreciates that. Very succinct messaging. Mr. Kushwaha, that gives you a little extra time if you need it. So please go ahead, sir. You have up to 5 minutes or a little bit more to address the committee. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, committee members. Thank you for inviting me to offer the findings and recommendations of the National Security Center of Excellence. The NSCOE is a Canadian NGO composed of academics and practitioners covering key elements of international law and domestic law, technology, policy, and politics that impact Canada and Canadians. We assist private and public sectors with their insider and foreign threat actor risks and issues through research across Canada as well as globally. Our findings are summarized as advice, maintaining privacy, and shared with various departments and agencies of the Government of Canada to help them formulate policy. I begin with some normalizing information regarding espionage and sabotage. Under international law, espionage and sabotage are expected from foreign states, dating long since before all of us were born, and we do it too. Indeed, key areas are considered off limits, including inherently governmental functions and critical infrastructure. When entities behave this way, our domestic laws can hold them criminally accountable. And while we expect foreign governments to perform espionage and sabotage, we don't expect foreign companies nor individuals to do so. And when they do, the government where they reside or our headquarters should hold them accountable. And when their government does not hold them accountable, others could consider these actors organs of the state acting on behalf of their government. So cyberspace presents another means to perform such actions. It's not surprising or new. With that out of the way, I present your findings. On September 27th, Vanessa Lloyd and David Vigneault testified at the Foreign Interference Commission. They shared examples of foreign activities by governments of China, Pakistan, India, Iran, and others. And while studying behaviors of China and Russia at our center, we noticed the trend of these countries and their ability to perform intricate influence activities over cyber that approach but do not cross the threshold of armed conflict, limiting Canada's options for lawful responses. Their intricate methods also make it very difficult for the public or even elected officials to notice. Example, since COVID, working from home is very common and expected. Companies and governments around the world supported this, including the U.S. Army, for matters of up to classified secret in 2,000 homes. From a cyber perspective, the communications are well encrypted and considered safeguarded. From a physical perspective, a small sensor on a window will pick up voices, which are sent for processing to determine methods to influence. Civil servants and elected officials remain easy targets. Similarly, we've studied behaviors of Canadians raising monies within domestic communities to send abroad to influence the public of another country. These types of activities are not limited to specific cultures or backgrounds of people. Some of the Canadian religious groups are sending money abroad to help with protesting and sometimes violence. Indeed, it's not the entire group of individuals at these places of worship. Organized crime. We've noticed an increase in the number of active organized crime groups and in smaller cities in Canada. In various well-respected restaurants, one can observe drug deliveries to affluent patrons and staff, ordered over mobile phones like an Uber ride. Organized crime groups send their monies into foreign jurisdictions using cryptocurrency and influence foreign policy and publicly elected officials. We believe Canadian laws are not adequately written or tested to counter such activities, and because of this, certain governments in Europe and Asia see Canada as supporting foreign influence and even terrorism. While the U.S. is a strong ally, they have a very different view on and legal disputes on important matters to Canada, like trade and our Arctic sovereignty. U.S. headquartered companies are highly influential in civil servant promotions to offering them well-remunerated roles upon their retirement, influencing government operations and senior decision-making. Foreign headquartered companies are employing Canadians, allowing foreign states to legally drive influence through their headquartered companies into the minds of their staff located in Canada. So these are really no quick solutions, and on to our recommendations. The GC should undertake comprehensive educational program to immunize Canadian society against misinformation and information manipulation in general. Using Finland's model, almost a decade ago, Finland recognized the same vulnerabilities as Canada's today and embarked on a whole of society education effort to protect democracy, bringing fact-checking awareness to kindergartners up to and including retirees. Canadian voters located abroad fall directly under the jurisdiction and influence of foreign states, and our findings suggest that some states are using this as a strategic long-term influence vehicle. The only reasonable mitigations to such influence upon foreign-located Canadians are to strengthen international norms in Canada's favor. Cyberspace has only been around for like 30 years, and in that time, we can't formulate international customary law. We've signed treaties. In 2015, Canada ratified the 2001 Budapest Convention on International Cybercrime, And we haven't signed the additional 2 protocols, nor the 2014 Malibu Convention. Like many other countries, Canadian civil servants were stuck accepting data sovereignty risks on behalf of Canada. Instruments like the UN Convention Against Cybercrime exist. However, the Centre is recommending rejecting the treaty as it diminishes our sovereignty. It's the Centre's position that Canada should continue to promote good state behavior through open communications and normative behaviors. We need to show international parties that we do not support these actions onto others from within Canada and upon Canada. Thank you very much for your time, and best of luck.
Thank you, Mr. Kushwa. I'm going to start by going to Mr. Caputo. We've got 6-minute rounds to start, and Mr. Caputo is going to start us off for 6 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Chair. And I would like to thank Mr. Kushwara and Mr. McAndrews for being here. I listened with a lot of interest to the openings. Really, really interesting stuff. I feel like I could talk with both of you for some time. Well, I didn't say how long I was going to talk, Mr. Chair. I said how long I could talk, because those who know me know I like to talk. Now, very interesting, Mr. Kushwara, you talked about foreign companies as opposed to governments. They're obviously, they're different entities, right? Government is completely different. But what I found really interesting was when you talked about a foreign company becoming an organ of the state, as in, I would say, like akin or essentially carrying out a government's bidding. Is that an accurate framing?
It's a way of saying it, indeed. Please continue.
Yeah, but sometimes government does things, and it might be deliberate, or it might not be deliberate, but at the end of the day, it can result in misinformation. And disinformation. And I'm going to give you an example. I'm just going to have a quick look here to get the date. I believe it was September 17th, 2024. And the Trudeau Liberal government actually gave $340,000 to a film, to the production of a film that appeared at the Toronto International Film Festival. And this was a pro-Russian film, as I understand it. Now, I don't know that anybody went through this and said, okay, this is exactly what we're doing. But even if it wasn't, if it was, somebody should be fired. If it wasn't, it seems to me like quite a mess up when we're giving $340,000 of your money, my money, our money to pro-Russia propaganda. Do you have anything to say about that?
I'm not familiar with that particular case or scenario, but it is an interesting piece of information you're providing, and based on what you've shared, I think it's very difficult for us to point to any politically elected individual in that decision-making process. And I think that the challenge that we have, as I pointed out, is sometimes it's our civil servants that make these decisions that harm. And there's I would say, let's clarify that. There's 3 different types that we characterize of insider threat actors. Okay, there's some that are non-malicious, without intent. Oops, I did this, I had no idea. And then there's malicious with intent. Okay, and then there's also non-malicious, but with intent. And that's the really weird one. I can say, I'm not malicious, but I really thought this would be better, so I did it. And yes, it contravened policy, or it didn't have the right outcome.
Right. What's interesting to me about what you're saying there is that so often in misinformation and disinformation, we assume it's a problem that impacts us from elsewhere, that it is external coming into Canada. But, the example I just gave, and I know that there are other, we just had a panel about a formerly trusted news source propagating blatant misinformation. And what I find interesting about that is it's almost like a wake-up call to Canada that, you know what, sometimes when we have $340,000 being given to a film that shouldn't be, or we have news sources, or as parliamentarians, we suffer from it. I don't know that this is just someone else's problem that impacts us. I think we need to look in the mirror. What do you say about that?
Interesting way. I like the idea of looking in the mirror, indeed. I think it works well at a diplomatic relations level as well. I feel also it's interesting to note that when funding is received by external parties, we trust them to do certain things for Canadian interests. And while they may continue down this path, those perspectives may change as they result in their reporting or whatever work they may do. And in this case of film, I think it's very, I think it's a little bit of a complicated matter there, that one may need to oversee them. And there's just so much funding that we give to so many different entities, NGOs, to even supporting entities around the world, that it would be very difficult to have that kind of oversight with our small taxpayer income.
You raise an excellent point there as well, and that is that, so often people will be very quick to label the right as, this is a problem just on the right, but there's actually a fair amount of money that comes in on the left, and I hate using right versus left. I would call them extremes. We'll just call it extremes. But there is a lot of money that comes in illegally from American NGOs, for instance, that I think a lot of people would find the views as being not within Canadian norms or not within the mainstream. And that funds people who are carrying out extremes in Canada. And this happens, it's seemingly during elections. There's one name, is it the Tides Foundation? Is that the one? Yeah, the Tides Foundation. My understanding is that money sometimes comes up into Canada, and then that propagates local disinformation. I mean, how do we stop that?
Yeah, I mean, especially with our allies, coming from our states and the allies, as we call our allies, right? So I feel your pain, and I will say that it's something that we see. And Canada's not the only country that's facing this. When we speak with other countries around Europe, they're facing it. Into Asia, they're facing it. Into African states, they're facing it. It's unfortunate, and I think it's just more obvious now. It's always been there.
Okay, I think I'm probably done. I'm sorry, Mr. McAndrews. I had questions for you as well, but I apologize. Thank you.
Mr. Baines, you're going to pick it up from there for 6 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to both Mr. McAndrews and Mr. Kushwaha for joining us today and providing some very interesting insight. As you know, I think we've had this discussion around misinformation, disinformation. This committee's been studying this for quite some time. I noticed that you've mentioned Finland, and I've heard about Taiwan as well. Like previous witnesses have also stated that Finland and Taiwan are examples to follow when it comes to fighting misinformation, disinformation, due to their proximity to Russia and China, respectively. Maybe could you expand on their programs and perhaps suggest other ways we can immunize Canadians from the effects of misinformation and disinformation?
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And so in Finland, obviously, as you described, they do have a significant challenge that's right at their sort of doorstep or neighbors, and not too far from ours as well, if you think of it. And they took action immediately. And in their model, much like I say, opposing to Canada, our policy may come for education from a federal level, but it's delivered at the provincial and territorial levels. And it's very difficult to govern from Canada, appropriately govern from Canada, as Finland does it. So I think, similar to their model, we need to come up with methods. And I'm not suggesting that this community does it, or I'm not suggesting that I'm proposing any policy methods to drive from federal down to provinces and territories. But I'm suggesting that something needs to get done to normalize that kind of information, as we do normalize mathematics or physics and science or language. And to that effect, Finland did an amazing job on that, in teaching the kindergartners how to do this, and giving them silly examples to real examples, as you would to any child. And it helped them grow. Even the elderly and the retired that would have difficulty with technology and receiving information from their friends and their neighbors, having a conversation at a coffee shop, can then really consider what they're hearing and say, you know what, let me look that up. And I know how to do that, because it's now part of my ecosystem, my living and my being. It just transformed. It took a decade.
For sources. It's something that definitely maybe could be done at a national level, where some type of a policy could be introduced and maybe delivered to provincial authorities, educational awareness, or some type of thing. But do you think misinformation, disinformation, is it increasing? You said it's always been there. Is it increasing, or is it the sophistication around it increasing? Why are we seeing an increase in this activity, or is it just become more obvious to us?
Maybe it's a mix of all of that. I feel, if I can make it really simple, I feel like we're all living off of digital devices these days. Laptops, computers, mobile phones, kids are on it, adults are on it, and it's a great mode of digesting it. Previously, if I wanted disinformation or misinformation, if I was in a war zone, I'd get pamphlets from the sky. Or if I was sitting in a home, I'd need to turn the television on a very specific channel, otherwise I see snow, and digest some information that would be considered misinformation or could be considered misinformation. Today, it's on my fingertips. So while it seems like there's more, or while it seems like it's just so much more accessible, and there is more, and there are means to deliver it faster, and with the ability to use someone's existing video, probably even mine now, and adjust my voice and apply it to something else, and I'll use technologies.
Deepfake and things of that nature. So can you maybe speak a little bit about you understand, or you're aware of the recently passed C-70? It's an act respecting countering foreign interference. And one provision of the act was to expand the preparatory acts offense. Can you expand, if you have knowledge of this, on how this will help address espionage or new foreign interference offenses?
I can speak to the justice side of things. I feel, although my opinion on that is, I feel like there's some positive work that's been done there, and I feel that I commend the work that was done on C-70, and especially to the sort of ability to deal with that in a legal form, and as well expanding some capacity for CSIS to perform in certain ways. Into the intricacies, I mean, I feel it's best that we can tear that apart another time if you choose. But I think that there's some content in there that still limits Canada. But we have to take steps, and we're taking good steps, and that's positive. So I commend everyone that participated in that to make that happen.
Can you maybe give an example of a limitation, and then maybe have a recommendation attached to it, if that's possible?
I think some of the limitations that we can see are, I feel as though, described earlier, some of the behaviors that are happening within Canada. It's very difficult to grab legal or receive legal or collect legal evidence is probably the right term there, or evidentiary data that you can use in court. It makes it very difficult for that, and to show intent. Those are two difficult things to capture in all of these cases.
I'm going to ask Mr. McAndrews maybe the same question. I know you talked about the difficulty of really knowing the impact of these things. Maybe could you expand on that same question?
I hate to do this, Mr. McAndrews, because I know we haven't heard from you, but if you can give us a quick response, like 15 seconds. Sorry.
I would commend for your consideration the June issue of the journal Nature, which expands on this healthy discussion about the prevalence and effects of misinformation on social media.
For that. Thank you, Mr. Baines. Monsieur Villemure, pour 6 minutes. Commencez, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. McAndrews, I looked into Digital Society Lab's workings, and I found very interesting research, and I'd like to ask you a question. So there are a lot of people who have come before us who describe disinformation, but can you talk to us about the future of disinformation?
Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Villeneuve. I'll do my very best. Earlier testimony from Professor Bengio said that he didn't think we spent enough time talking about the future, and I entirely agree. Right now, as he has testified to, generative AI is making it cheaper and easier to create deceptive video, audio, to better target messaging to individuals. And we need to make sure that research and policy keeps up with that. He is a better place than I am to describe the future of generative AI. I'm a political scientist by background, but I do worry very much that we will struggle to keep up with changing technology in this space.
La référence à M. Benjo est excellente.
Your reference to Mr. Benjo was excellent, by the way. But to put the question maybe in a different manner, disinformation for parliamentarians at the political level, because that's the point of our study. What do you see in your crystal ball?
Yeah, this is always difficult terrain to look into the crystal ball. I think at the most optimistic scenario, we're in a period of transition where people will observe more and more deceptive material and may turn back to more trusted sources. Trusted sources that have longstanding code of ethics and have resources to do the careful work of compiling and presenting the news in compelling ways. That's the most optimistic. The more pessimistic view is that the information ecosystem becomes polluted, overly so, to the point where people tune out. And as a political scientist, I worry not just that people might be believing false things, but they also don't know enough. And I worry that many folks are not interested in politics, as is very much their right, and perhaps also their privilege. But the danger is that as more and more people tune out because they cannot distinguish between true and false, that further degrades our democracy.
Merci beaucoup, M. McAndrew. M. Gouchwara, que dans les sphères de la vie publique, on dirait que le vrai...
Mr. Kushwara, we see that the real or the actual is being replaced by what's likely, and that opens the door to disinformation. So what do we do in a society where a society starts to think that the truth is beyond reach?
Ce qu'on fait.
I think all the videos that you see that are artificially produced, if you will, I think people let everything go by. And we have been talking about different problems and difficulties.
To a point where it doesn't matter what you present. Et moi, je pense qu'il y en a des sociétés au monde.
And I also think that there are already societies in the world that do this.
La ligne mince, tantôt, entre...
So there's a thin line that separates the legal from the illegal, and that line also applies to reality. Can you elaborate a bit more on that? So referring to China and Russia situation, right? Yes. We did some studies in Europe with European partners, and let's say since 2012, the Russians have been operating in this manner, and they've come up with a new way of interfering with the workings of other countries, and they are adding other methods too. And it's really easy to see that this is taking place with regard to campaigns, for instance. But it falls somewhere between laws of war and other areas. So the reality, the truth, doesn't seem to matter that much. And you refer to Finland, but I think that there are two very interesting elements: very strong media outlets and education from kindergarten onwards. So critical thinking doesn't seem to be very relevant or prevalent anymore, and we don't really have outlets to teach philosophy or other related materials. And this is not just for politicians and for government. If the population at large doesn't really believe in critical thinking, there doesn't seem to be much hope. Well, if we think about what children are consuming on their devices, on the television, on their phones, and even older folk, while they are following the famous and the rich, driving such and such car, or taking a plane to such and such destination. Well, they're not going to know about what's happening in the world. So they're looking to be entertained rather than learn something. Yes. Well, I mean, it seems to be quite negative, the outlook. This will be very brief. Okay, go ahead, please. So all this negativity that exists, not necessarily disinformation always, but it does have an impact that pushes us away from news. Yes, that is accurate. And if I compare Canada to other countries such as China or India, I mean, do you think that they are really letting their education system slip? No. Thank you very much.
Let's go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My questions are going to be for Professor McAndrews. Welcome to committee. Obviously, as a Hamilton MP, always good to have our best and brightest before parliamentary committees offering subject matter expertise. My question to you is really trying to get back towards your opening statement, which was around recommendations. You spoke of rules, and I believe it was in the context of algorithmic transparency. You talked about having that enforced under appropriate conditions. Is that correct?
Thank you very much for the question. I was referring to rules that would require, with appropriate permissions and conditions, that would require platforms to share information with researchers that would allow them to deepen their study of misinformation and possible tools to address it.
And what rules might you suggest? Has there been any substantive work from the Digital Society Lab on with specificity on which rules would be required?
The short answer is no. The longer answer is that I would commend to the committee the EU's Digital Services Act as a possible model for how very large platforms are required to share their data with European-based researchers. The ability of researchers to access the data of very large platforms is becoming harder and harder, which makes our ability to inform parliamentarians harder and harder.
And under what appropriate conditions? Is that something you've contemplated?
I can offer some initial thoughts that researchers should be doing it not for a commercial benefit, that they maintain adequate protections of privacy where it is pertinent. Some platforms, the data would be public. Other platforms, it is not. So very careful consideration of user privacy will be important here. And then I think some degree of auditing to ensure that we are receiving the appropriate data and with sort of enforcement mechanisms to follow.
In previous testimony, we talked a little bit about the kind of the commodification of information, the way in which it's sold, kind of data capitalism. I think about Clearview and AI and the way in which people can be profiled online using technology. I think about Cambridge Analytica and the way that it was used in 2016. We're now hearing about Russian connections to Canadian social media influencers. In your view, as a political scientist, what are the greatest risks related to misinformation and disinformation that might not only affect the work of Parliament and parliamentarians, but also future elections?
I appreciate the question. It's a big one and a difficult one. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, I think it's the ability for Canadians to make judgments about what's true and false, for them to make informed decisions. Canadians benefit from good information and make good decisions based on that. Likewise, in my view, no political party is advantaged by polluting the information space in the medium term. And so I think there is common cause to be built around
If
reasonable...
I could, sorry, I heard what you said. But I'm sure you're familiar with Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon has very publicly talked about flooding the zone with a word that would be unparliamentary. They talk about very openly on the far right about cognitive warfare. There seems to be, at least on the political spectrum, some advantage to having a post-truth environment where facts don't actually matter and political parties get to make it up as they go along. Is that not the case? Have you found any correlation or causation theory as it relates to the rise of right-wing populism and misinformation? And I know you've done work on COVID and vaccine hesitancy. Is there a correlation there between political ideology and partisan gain to be had?
Yeah, I don't think we want to pretend that there's no politics in misinformation. What I want to underscore to the committee is that there is a public interest that is served, and indeed the interests of major political parties in the medium term in building a resilient ecosystem. That it is entirely appropriate for this committee to spend time learning about specific examples and how they can drive lessons from those examples. But when the committee turns around to make recommendations, when there are laws proposed and rules proposed, we don't, I think, want to make the impression on Canadians that those are designed to advantage a particular political party.
Agreed. And with getting really to the point here, your Digital Society Lab has done some work on regulating digital election advertisements. Do you have, from that work in 2019 and 2021, do you have specific recommendations you'd like to present to this committee for our consideration, given that we're, potentially in a looming election and seemingly pretty far behind on having any real oversight?
Thank you again for the question. I was not directly involved in that research project, but I'd be happy to follow up with the committee on behalf of those researchers. I would say that, as I said in the opening statements, the importance of civil society and of academia in being empowered to undertake the detection of misinformation and being able to provide that to the public in an accessible way is critical. And I commend the work of my colleagues in the Canadian Digital Media Research Network. You heard earlier from Angus Bridgman of the Media Ecosystem Observatory. They are doing excellent work in serving Canadians in terms of the health of the media ecosystem.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Green.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Mr. McAndrews, based on Mr. Green's request, the clerk has made a note to get back to you about providing some of that information to the committee for consideration as we do draft our report. So the clerk will follow up with you on behalf of Mr. Green and the committee as well. We've concluded our first round. Very interesting discussion, gentlemen. Thank you for that. We're going to go to Mr. Cooper now for 5 minutes. Mr. Cooper, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Kushwaha, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing. You spoke about Beijing's interference, that their tactics in many instances are intricate, and to that end, it's difficult to address by way of law enforcement tools, for example, the laying of criminal charges, for instance. We saw in the 2019 and 2021 elections a concerted effort by Beijing to interfere. In the 21 election, it's now well established that there was a fairly sophisticated campaign to re-elect the Liberals and defeat certain conservative candidates, including MPs Kenny Chiu and Alice Wong. We could be heading into an election any time now. In your opinion, are we at greater risk, lesser risk, as great of a risk of seeing such interference activities on the part of Beijing or other hostile foreign states as we head into the next election?
Yeah, I think foreign state adversaries are going to play their game. And they're going to do it for their personal gains of their own reasons. Whether they're a politician doing it for their personal gain or a group of individuals doing it for personal gain, or if it's for the better of their country, their perspective. So there's really no escaping that reality. It's going to happen. It's how we can handle it. Now, how we can do things to possibly change that, I think it's important to note we do about $3.4 billion a day in trade with the United States, and that's 66% of our entire trade, about, let's say, round figures in last checking on global affairs. if you want to influence another country into doing what you need them to do, whether it be following norms or knocking it off, if I may say, in terms of foreign interference, you need something to push them with, and we don't have good trade capacity to do that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you spoke about disinformation on the part of politicians, because we saw a very recent example of that when the parliamentary secretary to the government House Leader, Liberal MP Mark Garrettson, spread blatant disinformation. He did so willfully, all for his political advantage. And
Point of order. Chair, I don't think this is time or place to have personal attacks on other parliamentarians. It's unparliamentary language. You said yourself that we were having a good series of testimonies here, and I think we need to keep it
I'm going to
clean.
allow Mr. Cooper to continue with his questions. You've got 2 minutes and 35 seconds, Mr. Cooper. This is a study on disinformation and misinformation and the impact it has on the work of parliamentarians. There is a broad range that members can go in their line of questioning on this. But Mr. Cooper, you have the floor. Go ahead, please.
Chair, just on that point, if I may continue.
My time.
Just on that point.
Okay.
It could be because if a member is questioning another member's speech in the House, that could be a question of privilege. I'm just saying.
I think so. I'm gonna on the point of order that Ms. Shanna. I mean, it's a matter of public record. There's, he's not. Mr. Cooper's not making anything up here. So I'm gonna ask him to continue. That addresses your point of order, Mr. Barrett. On this point of order, go ahead.
On that point of order, with respect to whether or not a member's speech in the House is being questioned, Mr. Cooper is very clearly staying relevant exactly to the subject that we're dealing with, Chair. Yeah, okay. And his question with respect to Mr. Garrettson deals with an admission of intentional spreading of false information by the member that he named, something for which that member admitted doing under threat of litigation. So this is important. He should be afforded some time to restate his question, Chair.
I'm pretty sure I've addressed that in the context of what this study is all about. There have been very specific examples cited on both sides of disinformation and misinformation, or as I like to call it, lying, being spread. And I will continue with Mr. Cooper for 2 minutes and 35 seconds, given the fact that we've granted that latitude and those specific examples to all members of this committee. Go ahead, Mr. Cooper.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I guess the truth hurts to Liberals because Mr. Garrettson...
Point of order again, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
We can, and you rightly said
just
this,
because
Chair.
you don't like what somebody's saying doesn't make it a
not.
relevant point of order.
Love what everything has been said today. Really appreciate the testimony of our witnesses. If we're going to have an honest, a solid study out of this, let's keep the partisanship and the hacks out of it, please.
Well, I've heard partisanship on all sides today, Ms. Khalid, so I'm going to continue with Mr. Cooper. Well, if anybody has a point of order, cite under the rules and regulations what that point of order is, and I'll consider it. Because you don't because anyone doesn't like what somebody says, doesn't mean that it is a relevant point of order. Mr. Cooper, go ahead for 2 minutes and 35 seconds, please.
Well, thank you for that, and it is my time, and I can use it as I wish. I noted that the truth hurts for the Liberals because Mr. Garrettson spread blatant disinformation for his political gain, and as a result, he had to settle in a legal action that was taken against him. And we saw further disinformation from none other than a network that claims that it is the most trusted news network in Canada that fraudulently doctored a video of Pierre Poilievre. And we had ministers in this government, including Minister St. Onge and MP Nur Mohammed, actually defend the doctoring of that video. So it just goes to show that when it comes to the Liberals, they're very much in favor of disinformation, just so long as it isn't against them. But in any event, the point is made. Mr. Bourgeois Again, I apologize. You spoke a little bit about Bill C-70. One of the tools in Bill C-70 is a foreign influence registry. Is that something that you see as being a useful tool to counter misinformation and disinformation from hostile foreign states?
On to parliamentarians. On to parliamentarians or in general?
In general.
So...
And maybe just to provide you with some context,
please.
When we look at the interference activities that occurred in the 2021 election, by the Beijing regime, there were certain Canadian-owned Chinese language media outlets that amplified this disinformation, that had links, partnership agreements with the PRC. They would now have to register. So it's in that context that I raised the...
I'm going to ask for a quick response, if you can, in 20 seconds or 30 seconds.
Short response, I don't think it's going to make any difference. I don't think a registry is going to make any difference because you'll just use somebody else. If it was my team doing it, let's say, for example, behaving this way, and I had a team of people, and 3 of them were on a registry, I wouldn't use them. Very simple. I would still perform the action. I would still get my results.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Romanato for 5 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and through you, I'd like to thank the witnesses for being here today. So I want to start first with Mr. Kushwaha, and I'm going to put these in 3 buckets. So with respect to the consumers of information, the creators of information, and of course then the channels of communication. And so you were talking a little bit about if you're an average person who is out there and you're looking at the media. Now, we know that there have been cases, and we just heard in the previous panel, of instances where Main Street media have erroneously put out information. So more and more people are turning to different platforms to get their information. So how would an average person, and you talked a little bit about the Finland model, distinguish between what they're reading is factual or not? Like, for instance, my mom, she would share stuff that she saw on Facebook about an actor passing away. It's been 3 times the poor actor had passed away, but, you know, she keeps sharing the information thinking it's true. How does a general person distinguish between what is real and what is not, and without them sharing it, right? They keep sharing the same misinformation thinking they take it as true. What would you recommend to us?
It's an interesting thing. Does it really matter if somebody shared it 3-4 times? I kind of look at that and say, okay, so they shared it a few times. It's interesting to them. It's meaningful to them. Does it matter if they think that the person has died again and again and again? I think what matters is the real disinformation is that I mislead you to believe something extremely harmful, especially at societal level or political level, to cause you to behave or react in a certain way that could be either changing your decision in how you intend to vote, or if it was a political scientist, changing their behavior and what they're intending to write in terms of advice, or if it was a person that was on the edge, maybe get them to do something violent.
So on that note, now I'm turning to the creator of the information. So and I want to focus on parliamentarians or, say, political candidates. So I would assume we have a responsibility to put out accurate information. There may be no rules preventing us from putting out misinformation, but I would assume there should be some ethical or at least internal gauge on what we put out there. And I'll give the example south of the border when we had a presidential candidate sending misinformation about FEMA during the hurricane. There is a responsibility as parliamentarians, as political candidates, to not put out misinformation that could actually endanger people. Would you agree with that? And how can we make sure that folks who are in these positions of, I don't want to say authority, but a position of influence, exactly, thank you, to understand that the ramifications of what is being put out there has real-world consequences?
I think the idea of saying, when you ask someone a question in a political level, rarely do they say, I'm really sorry, I don't know. And that humility of just saying, let me look into that. I'll get back to you. I really don't know. You rarely hear that. And I feel like it should be okay.
Mm-hmm.
You can't remember everything. You can't have somebody whispering in your ear every moment to have it perfect. You will mess up my name. It is complicated. So it's okay to say, I don't know. And I think if we promote that kind of idea that, let me look at, it'll also help promote the concept of it's okay not to know right away. Let me look into that. You gave that to me. That's very interesting. Let me look into that. No, react. You don't have to. It's okay.
Now, in terms of the channel, when you have social media platforms that are, and I'll give the example of X or previously Twitter, that is allowing misinformation, disinformation to be propagated, what role do social media giants have in terms of their responsibility to fact-check information?
I feel like Canada tried really hard to push that pressure upon media giants to get them to fact check, and what happened is they backpedaled, obviously, as you know, and removed all access. So unfortunately, that harms Canadians in a different way. I don't know if there's really any real good answer to this from my side, so I apologize. I don't think I have a solution to that of any kind or even thoughts. I actually have, unfortunately, negative thoughts to that.
Okay.
It'll be abused is what I'm thinking.
Okay. Mr. McAndrews, I didn't have a chance and I have no more time, but I just wanted to thank you for giving us that information regarding the June edition of Nature. I will read it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Romanato. Monsieur Villemure, pour 2 minutes 30 secondes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So I'll have a question to Mr. Kushwaha. We've seen in the last 20 years that press agencies such as France Press and others have disappeared. So the media outlets are running out of these resources. In 2012, I was in Libya, and the assassination of Muammar Gaddafi was reported differently in different parts of the world. So news sources are drying up, and there's a lot of misinformation. How can we know what's happening in the Israel-Palestine situation, for instance? There are many sources today. I know that people get some of their information on Telegram, for instance, from small groups or groups, again, on WhatsApp. They share videos. It's still, nonetheless, difficult. I'll say this in English.
People care as much about human life and human dignity as we think they should. Because if we did, we would stop death and dismemberment immediately. And then you wouldn't need to share videos of horrific events or children washing up on shores that we've seen and remind that happened 9, 10 years ago, and oh, yeah, I remember that. And what do we do about it? So if you really care about human life and human dignity, do something.
Monsieur McAndrews, je pose la...
Mr. McAndrews, I'll ask you the same question. Without credible news sources and with everything we can read on many platforms, how can anyone know what's really happening in the situation between Israel and Palestine?
The Israel-Palestine conflict is not my area of expertise, but I'm happy to speak more generally. I think that different actors need to be empowered to detect rapidly misinformation in a flexible way, and that can be shared publicly or with platforms in order to take potential mitigating action. I think that civic and scientific media literacy is critical. This committee has heard from media smarts, from civics, experts in this field, and should continue to learn and to support efforts to promote media and scientific literacy. I would say that these things need to be evidence-based, they need to be up-to-date, and that researchers can play a role in helping those materials stay up-to-date with changing technology.
Le citoyen ne sait pas si les sources sont basées sur des faits.
But citizens don't know if the sources rely on facts. That's the problem that I see. So the credibility of media outlets isn't doing really great, and you see anything and everything online. So it's almost impossible to know what's real, and sometimes it doesn't even matter what's real. But back in the day, things were different. If people grew up in a certain period, they will never know what the reality is. So that's something I was saying to Mr. Kushwa before today's sitting. We have very limited time. Thank you, Mr. Villemure.
Half minute, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Professor McAndrews, can you provide examples? I know you referenced the European example of other jurisdictions' best practices for countering the impacts of disinformation, misinformation, and malinformation in the work of parliamentarians.
That is a great question, and one in which I would ask to be able to return to the committee with a further brief on the subject.
That would be very helpful, and we would encourage you to get that in. As you know, your testimony forms the recommendations, the substantive work, right? We don't get to do it in these studies. It really does come from subject matter experts. So perhaps you can just share a little bit about what some misconceptions about misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation that you might have come across in your research that might be generally accepted, but might not actually be the truth when it comes to those subjects.
Sure. Maybe two observations. Again, from a recent issue of Nature, we may be misperceiving the volume of misinformation on social media. We may be overestimating it. And this is why it's important for researchers to be able to have access to these data to maintain the ability to detect flexibly mis and disinformation. But we may be overestimating the prevalence of misinformation. Certainly my colleagues at the Media Ecosystem Observatory who measure prevalence of misinformation in a certain way, that estimate strikes me as rather low. That's available in their monthly situation reports. So that's one area. The second is the causal relationship, right? So we might imagine or fear indeed that social media misinformation is polarizing people. But the alternative possibility is that people with extreme views are exposed to social media misinformation. And so that kind of uncertainty is important to address through high quality public scientific research on an ongoing basis, because it is a moving target as technology is changing, and so sustained attention is required. I would say in Canada, a lot of this research is in the United States, and Canada is not the United States, so research in Canada is very much necessary here as well.
I would tend to agree. Thank you so much for joining us here today to both witnesses. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Green. I've got time for two 2.5-minute rounds, and then I do need a little bit of time at the end of it. It's in regards to the correspondence that was shared with committee members today from X. We just need to discuss that briefly after we're done, and I expect it to be very, very brief. Mr. Barrett, for 2.5, go ahead.
So we've heard reports of hostile foreign entities, foreign regimes that have been funding violence, like the pro-Hamas, pro-terror, anti-Semitic demonstrations that we've been seeing on Canadian streets without any consequences. And this is as a result of a failure by the government to actually designate these groups for what they are. And Sami Doon is one. They enjoy nonprofit status currently in Canada. The Houthis in Canada, again, they're legally allowed to fundraise, recruit, and organize. And they both should clearly be banned. And so the question is, what should the government be doing to detect this foreign-backed interference that leads to intimidation, both of political and non-political actors, the promotion of hatred on our streets? Because these are two very clear, using open source information and just simple observation allows people to determine this, but these groups are self-declared in doing what they're doing. So we've made the assertion they should be banned. What should the government be doing to detect these activities in a proactive way? Because what you permit, you promote, and so Canadians would believe that the information being spread by these bad actors is okay. It's legitimized by the government by virtue of the fact that they failed to take any action to criminalize these groups.
It's interesting. What you permit, you promote. I would hope that the public has the sense to look things up and make educated decisions and formulate their own outcomes. But I see where you're going in terms of what you're attempting to describe, and I appreciate it. So I think that what can the government do? From a policy perspective, I think there's quite a bit in place already. And I think the challenge is that funds come from many sources. I'll say what we've tracked at the center, we've been able to track. We have an entire technology team. And you can see transactions coming from foreign sources into Canada over cryptocurrency. But I also see them leaving Canada. I found organizations in Canada that will say, hey, we'll handle your transactions and we'll funnel them all into this one entity, and then we'll funnel them out. So you can no longer trace source to destination. Now, while you can see the wallets, you don't know exactly who owns the wallet. Nevertheless, you can see transactions happening. And that complicates things because it looks like we're sending money out as well as receiving. So are we performing some form of influence upon others as much as they're performing on us? And if it's the citizens that are doing this, it can be considered unlawful. You have to have evidence and you have to have intent, in Canada at least. And I feel that those are very difficult to capture in the financial realms, even for FinTrack, because, or the RCMP, notably, because those wallets are meant to be anonymous.
Thank you, Mr. Kushwaha. Ms. Shanahan for 2.5 minutes till the end.
Excellent. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I will be speaking in French, Mr. Kushwaha, because this is a subject that is very important for the people in my riding, Châteauguay-Lacolle. Now, we are big consumers of platforms such as Meta or Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and others. And we have heard testimony on this previously. Witnesses referred to the group Tenet in Montreal that participated in a Russian disinformation campaign. So I'd like to hear you on that. What are the best measures or the steps we can take to make sure that we are protecting Canadians, but also Canadians what can Canadians do themselves to protect themselves? We are actually conducting a study on this as we speak. We are looking into the most frequently used online services. And if you take TikTok, for instance, or other platforms, or take Instagram or Facebook, the number of users on Instagram are more than TikTok users in Canada. Instagram users usually outnumber TikTok users. And our partners in the U.S. are introducing legislation to change the use of TikTok, but not really Instagram. Okay, that's interesting. Why do you think that is? Is that because it's an American company? I don't know why, but it might be because they do not want to make services available to people where it would be very easy for China, for instance, or other countries to convey some information. But in Canada, we really don't have such platforms. So it's hard for Canada to regulate the information flowing to the people because they're not based here in Canada, you mean? Are you seeing new trends in this type of disinformation with ChatGPT or AI? What are you observing? Apologies, Ms. Shanahan, but a very quick answer, please. Well, if you don't use services like that, then you're falling behind. You have to use services of that kind. Even at school, it's not normal not to use them. Thank you.
Mr. Kushwaha and Mr. McAndrews, I want to thank you for appearing before committee today. You've provided us with some great information, and I, as chair on behalf of the committee, really appreciate the time that you've taken with us today. I'm going to dismiss the witnesses. We do have a little bit of business that I need to discuss. Earlier today, every member of the committee was sent correspondence that we had received from X. As I mentioned to the committee on Tuesday, that the plan is to have social media companies come here after the Thanksgiving break. The request from X is to appear in camera. Typically, it hasn't been the process of this committee to have witnesses appear in camera. They stated the reasons. The challenge that I have is that I need to know what the committee thinks of this and what they want, because a majority of the decision has to be of the committee. So, Ms. Khalid, I'll go to you. I see Mr. Green. Go to you first, Ms. Khalid, and then Mr. Green. Go ahead, Ms. Khalid.
Thanks very much, Chair. As I have said many times, this report, this study is very important. And it would be a massive shame if a company like X that has all of the privileges of controlling public discourse, I would say, to not be able to come before us and be on the record. I would like for their testimony to be part of the record, and I think that Canadians need to hear them on the record in public for what they have to say, because they are accountable at the end of the day.
Thank you for that. And, that being said, if they come before the committee, and we are going to extend another invitation to them, if it is the will of the committee publicly, they can respond in whatever manner they want. If they feel that information, this is my view anyways, if information is too sensitive, then they can just say it's too sensitive. So, but again, I agree with you. They are under the same privileges and protections that we are as members of Parliament. Mr. Green, and then Ms. Romanato. Okay,
I
thank
find
you.
it startling, quite frankly, Mr. Chair, that this is their opening salvo, that in a public forum, a platform that claims to be the digital public square is coming right off the bat asking to be in camera. Elon Musk is not special. X is not special. Everybody comes before this committee. They testify in public. And I would disagree. While it is true they can say whatever they want, committees have the power to send for people, evidence, and documents. If they come to this committee and try to obstruct it in any way, they will be, in my opinion, acting in contempt of this committee. So we demand and expect fulsome answers, candor. I don't care what's happening in the United States of America, quite frankly. I want the social media platforms here. I want it in public, and it must be on the record.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Green. I'm going to go to Mr. Barrett.
Yeah, just a brief repetition of one point that Mr. Green made, and that's that it can be offered by any witness that they're not comfortable sharing a piece of information, but at the end of the day, that it's up to us, the information that we ask. They're required to, and we've been well served at this committee with your direction to witnesses to advise them of their obligation to provide information. Look, we meet with witnesses in public, and there's no precedent elsewhere, and no kid glove treatment elsewhere for platforms. They frankly get a much better experience, a much softer ride in front of parliamentary committees than they do at congressional hearings. And so, and we can give them a kid glove response, and you could let them know we look forward to hearing from you in public, but attend by invitation or attend under summons, but it'll be in public either way.
Okay, and there are two forms of communication. There's verbal, witnesses appearing in front of us, and there's also written as well, which is an option that's available to them, and we've afforded that option to other witnesses. Monsieur Villemure.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Quand on
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When you call yourself a social media platform, I mean, you have some accountability and responsibility that you cannot avoid, so they have to appear in public.
That is, it is a decision of the majority of the committee, that a unanimous decision, that we extend the invitation and that they appear in public.
I wonder how that's going to impact our Twitter analytics going forward.
Well, we'll see.
Well, some will suffer
Okay,
more than others.
I appreciate dealing with that quickly. Look, we've been here for 3 weeks. We've had an interesting session. Thanksgiving is coming up. 4 weeks it's been. Yes, see, I lost count. I lost count because, but I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. Spend some time with your families. Mr. Green, when you get back, you make sure you take that runner out for a celebratory dinner, and Miss Khalid will pay for it. And yeah, and just have a great Thanksgiving break off, and we'll see you all when we get back. Okay, meeting's adjourned. Thank you.